Well, joining me here in the studio is Hannah Weisfeld, director of Yachad, which advocates a political resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. First of all, your reaction to what's going on in the United States.
Well, I find it interesting that the press is now entirely focused on students on university campus rather than what's actually happening on the ground. And it almost seems that, you know, we've forgotten that there is actually a war taking place in Israel-Gaza and that we're in the middle still of hostage and ceasefire negotiations. And yet now the focus of conversation has become about students. And in some respects, it's quite frustrating because really the focus should be on what's happening over there and it is overtaken by the things we've just watched.
I mean, given this conflict has gone on for 7 months and, you know, as newsmakers, this is something that becomes increasingly difficult to capture the imagination of audiences. Do you think that this is a way to highlight what is actually happening on the ground?
Well, clearly those students think so, and those students have an absolute democratic right to protest. I think what has happened in America, and actually to some extent has happened on the streets of the United Kingdom, is this unbelievable polarization, which is actually quite dangerous, which says, I'm either in the camp of supporting the Palestinian people, or I'm in the camp of supporting Jewish students who feel discriminated against or fearful. And you need to pick a side. And actually, once you've picked that side, that is the only side you can be on. And I think what it's doing is entrenching the conflict and making it actually much harder long term. Because there
to have nuanced conversations.
To have nuance. And there are many people, and I would say the vast majority of students, and polling shows that the vast majority of people in this country don't sit at either ends of that polarization, but the polarization is what most of us hear. So what we're seeing now, and that figure is actually quite shocking, that 2,000 people have been arrested. But actually it's still quite a minority of people in terms of, you know, the discourse on Israel-Palestine, but it's obviously visually and vocally the loudest. And I think what's quite dangerous about this whole conversation is that eventually what happens is that it's the people at either end of that polarization. So, you know, whether it's protesters, counter-protesters, the people that are screaming the loudest, the people that have said the most extreme things that dictate the course of the conversation.
And as you say, the conflict continues and we are still hearing about ceasefire negotiations and, you know, the Hamas delegation going away to think about it, the Israelis going away and thinking about it. And this has really been the state of play for many, many months without any real resolution.
No, and I have to say, unfortunately, these protests, you know, Biden said, I think today or yesterday, it makes no difference to me in terms of what my decision and what I do with Israel-Palestine. And we saw, you know, headlines today, Cameron, you know, agreeing to sell weapons to Israel just 2 days after the British aid workers were killed. The noise around the conflict and the reality of who is making the decisions is actually quite far apart. And really, I think that, you know...
So you don't think these sorts of demonstrations make policymakers sit up and think?
No, I think they do, but I think what's happened now is that they're almost divorced from the reality on the ground. The conversation about what's happening in America is actually about what's happening in America, and it doesn't really any longer have that much to do with what is happening in the region. And for me, the thing that I would really like to see is getting people out on the streets in support of the people, you know, in the region, on the ground, and in support of you know, of less polarization and peacemaking, basically. And unfortunately, the debate outside the region has become so polarized that you don't really see that at all anymore.
Hannah Weisfeld, really fascinating hearing your thoughts and the work of your organisation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.